worldwide pandemic, related travel restrictions, changing domestic conditions have all highlighted the importance and the desirability of global mobility. So it's the perfect time for me to talk to you today about the global mobility solutions afforded through U.S. investment options, the E-2 and the EB-5 visas. These are perfect opportunities now more than ever for reasons that we will cover. Okay. So, disclaimer, I am a lawyer, so I have to do this. My firm, Carolyn Lee PLLC, is a U.S. investment immigration law firm. This presentation is informational and promotional. It does not constitute legal advice. Only communications under a signed engagement letter creates an attorney-client relationship. Any information shared with you about laws outside the United States should be further investigated separately, and this content is copyrighted. About Carolyn Lee PLLC. 15 years investment immigration advising experience. Read all about it on my website. I will not bore you with it here. I've served as the 4-term chair of the National EB-5 Committee of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, thousands of lawyers membership. I've served as the legislative counsel to IIUSA Invest in the USA, which is the largest EB-5 regional center trade association. And I've received a number of accolades for which I'm very, very grateful, including recognition in Best Lawyers, International Who's Who, Outstanding Asian Americans in Business, presidential commendations from American Immigration Lawyers Association, and so forth. So the roadmap for today's presentation, we're going to talk about why immigrate to the United States, because truly we have a global audience with us today. Why U.S. immigration by investment. Why the E-2 visa makes sense now. Why the EB-5 visa always makes sense. E-2 and EB-5 requirements 101 at a high level, just the basics. And investment immigration process made easy. That's where I'll get to talk about our process. So why immigrate to the United States? So I'll say that these are my reasons and the reasons of my family when we decided to immigrate when I was 7 years old. And these reasons overlap with many of my clients. Education, right? United States, top marks from diverse sources. We've got the best universities in the world, and this is a key attracting point. And you'll see that the hyperlinks are to some of the sources that you'll be able to access when you get a copy of this PowerPoint. Security. We're lucky here to enjoy a stable society and prosperity. We're all doing pretty well here. Accountability, I mean that politically. So our elected leaders are elected. We have elections and they are answerable to the public. We've got a very active media, and the politicians don't like that so much, but there you go. Culture, of course, this is an incredible asset of the United States. Our music, our art, sports, it's a celebration of individuality, freedom, wealth. We do celebrate the acquisition of wealth, and energy. That defines America in my view. Innovation as well. American ingenuity, inventiveness. We're the proud home of Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Jeff Bezos, Stephen Jobs, and the list goes on and on. Entrepreneurism. This is also a quintessential American trait that is probably very attractive to you all. It's freedom of commerce and to be inventive in the field of business and pursue wealth. Why immigration by investment? Well, that's easy because it's easier. So let's look at traditional paths to US immigration, which are harder than ever and not likely to change. So traditional immigration path has been family-based. So there's a family member sponsoring a foreign national for US immigration benefits? Well, the roadblock there is antagonism to chain migration and the family reunification policy undergirding our US immigration laws since the 1950s. That's changing today. And the second traditional immigration path has been by employment. So an employer would sponsor you for a green card or for temporary work. Well, the roadblock there is visa quota backlogs. This is huge. And those of you in the audience who are Indians know this very, very well. The EB-2 green card category for professionals, Indian professionals, span from decades to, by some estimates, over 150 years. So this is obviously a situation that needs fixing, but in the meantime, this is what we have. So why the E-2 visa makes sense now? There's no quota. There's no backlog. It's quick. The processing is relatively short. It's a few months rather than years and decades, and maybe over a century. It's not subject to immigration bans. So you know that there have been bans on travel because of COVID and to protect the US labor market. The E-2 visa is not listed. Spouses are covered. They can have separate work authorization. It's universal. They can work for anybody or not work. Children are covered. They can attend school anywhere in the country, private or public. And there's no need to have an unabandoned foreign domicile. You can leave all your household effects and move entirely to the United States. And the US consulates are starting to reopen post-COVID. And the list goes on. There's no maximum duration. Under the traditional non-immigrant visas, H or L work visas, there is a statutory maximum, nothing for E-2s in that regard. 5-year visas in most instances will be put in your passport. Low investment threshold, so there isn't a set amount. It really depends on the nature of the business, so it's flexible. It's a green card solution, structured the right way, and from the outset, it could transition into permanent residence or a green card, into an EB-5 green card. It's also a green card solution if you are already in the EB-5 backlog or the E-2 backlog. You can work, your spouse can work, your children can go to school while waiting out the backlog. So the E-2 solution is flexible, it's practical, and it's relatively quick. Truly a fantastic solution for the global citizen of today. So why the EB-5 visa always makes sense? Well, I call the EB-5 visa the independence visa, and here are the reasons. No family sponsorship needed. No employer sponsorship needed. US residency, it's a green card, it's permanent, it's not merely temporary. Choice to work or not work for investors and family members. Again, it's not tethered to employment sponsorship. In-state tuition to the best universities in the world. It's a self-petition solution for high net worth individuals, not tied to employment or family. It's residency, and it's a path to US citizenship. Now, there is an extensive backlog in the EB-5 category for Chinese investors. The good news is that there is an E-2 solution, which I'll be discussing. The other good news is that we will be getting a lot of visas spilling over from the family-based side of things in the coming fiscal year. This is because of COVID travel restrictions. There are a lot of unused visas on the family side. They're going to come over to the employment side, and EB-5 numbers could potentially double what they are in terms of the quota. So that is good news in terms of the backlog for EB-5 Chinese investors. It's a great solution for other backlogged investors. If you're an E-2 and you're an Indian, or you would only potentially have the E-2 or the EB or the EB-2 or the EB-3 options, if you're an Indian national, the EB-5 option is really arguably the only way to go. So I've just done a quick price comparison, if you will, for you, comparing the investment thresholds for various competing or other popular residency by investment programs as compared with the EB-5. So it's very obvious. These are obviously fantastic programs, but they all have higher investment thresholds than the United States, and this chart makes that very plain. Okay, so the EB-5 requirements in a nutshell, basic requirements, they're really two. It's investment, and the minimum is the 900,000 US in a targeted employment area, which is a rural area or high unemployment area. These are the areas we want to incentivize projects and investment into. Jobs, there is a jobs requirement. This is unique. Each investor must create 10 US full-time jobs. The key initial decision really is whether to invest in a regional center or whether to go in a direct investment. That is an investment that is run and operated and owned by the EB-5 investor. Now, 95% of the decisions go in the way of the regional center investments. And why? It's easier. There is a professional team managing that investment for you. The job creation plan, the business plan, has been drafted out. There is monitoring that's happening on the job creation front by other professionals in the regional center context. Process, it's a three-stage multi-year process, and it starts with the I-526 petition, which is a filing made with the U.S. immigration agency called U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS. After the 526 petition is approved, which is going to show how the investment is going to create the 10 jobs and how the investor is going to keep the investment in, you go into visa processing, usually at a U.S. consulate abroad. And this is where you apply for the immigrant visa or the green card. The 829 petition is the last step. That's where the EB-5 investor proves up to USCIS that the jobs in fact were created as planned and the investment was kept in the investment as planned. So here's a handy EB-5 process timeline that you'll get with this PowerPoint. And it breaks down the process in terms of the approximate times, and these are times as reported. So you'll see that there is the span of time from 526 filing to decision. Then you go into the visa process, which is immediate for everybody except China and Vietnam, and highlighting that it is immediately available for Indians, which is very, very good news because earlier this fiscal year, there was a backlog, but there isn't. And it looks pretty good for the near future because especially of the spillover of the additional numbers coming over from the family side for Indians. Then you go into the conditional green card for 2 years, at the end of which we file the I-829 petition with USCIS. Now, the E-2 visa requirements are different. There is an investment, but there is no minimum. It has to be a substantial investment, but that's relative to the kind of business. There is no job requirement. The enterprise has to be real and operating, and it can't be marginal. It can't just be sloughing off just enough income for the investor and the family. Or the investment has to yield significant economic contribution. There has to be a treaty with the United States. This is different from the EB-5, which does not require a treaty. And the investor has to develop and direct the US business, which is, in my view, a higher threshold of involvement in the E-2 business. The E-2 visa requirements, the process is simpler. It's one step for current treaty nationals. If you are already from a country with whom the United States enjoys a treaty of friendship, commerce, and navigation, then you can apply for the E-visa straight away. It's 2 steps if you're not currently a treaty national, and we're going to talk about that a bit. So One step for current treaty nationals, you apply for the E-2 visa at the consulate. 2 steps for non-treaty nationals. You first acquire treaty nationality, and then you apply for the E-2 visa at the consulate. The one-step process first, applying for the E-2 visa, well, you would go into, at my firm, the CLT E-2 client flow process. This is designed to make this process as streamlined and as easy on your end as possible. Fluid client experience from start to finish. That's the goal, that's the design. Submit the CLP prepared visa application. So we'll do all the work, and then you click the submit button on the online application form. You schedule the visa interview based on your availability after all of that. There's a Zoom interview training so that you're prepared for that visa interview. And thereafterwards, we'll meet with you again to see how it went, to debrief, and to give you further instructions. Now the 2 steps. So this is if you don't yet have a treaty nationality, this includes Chinese and Indians. First, would have to acquire the treaty nationality, and this is where the global mobility concept really comes in. There are citizenship by investment programs that offer a second citizenship for an investment. And the countries that have also an E-2 treaty with the United States include Grenada, Turkey, and Montenegro. So we're going to talk about those 3 countries a little bit. So this is a CBI comparison along just a few dimensions that are most relevant in most instances. So there is the investment threshold amount. There's a comparison there. The Grenada and Turkey programs state their investment threshold in dollars, Montenegro in euros, and then there is the US equivalent there. The age of children to be included in the application, of course, this is very important for most families. It's 18 years for Turkey and Montenegro. Grenada is generous, it goes up to 30. But remember, for US immigration purposes, children are capped out at 21. So if your child is almost 21, then we would need to talk about solutions for keeping the family together, or for the child separately. Visa-free travel, this is a key selling point of the CBI to enhance global mobility. Lots of countries, visa-free travel, and those numbers do fluctuate. So there may be more visa-free travel countries for those countries. E-2 visa requirements. Applying for the E-2 visa after you acquire the CBI with the treaty country, then you go into the flow that we talked about. That fluid process that we will take care of. You do 3 things. You hit send, you schedule the interview, and you get the visa. Zoom interview trainings and Zoom debriefing meetings thereafter. So, about me and my firm, investment immigration made easy. We are truly, truly dedicated to a fluid client experience. That's the experience that we want, is that experience for our clients. We think that the US immigration requirements are pretty difficult, so the process should be made easy as possible. And our motto is, the world is in your hands, your case is in ours. And I must say, they're pretty good hands. So thank you. As a special thank you to webinar attendees, there is a free US investment immigration consultation that's without fee, de gratis. You can contact us on our worldwide website. You can contact me directly through email. You can contact Telegram, phone, of course. And I would invite you to take a quick survey here. And I believe also BLS, the webinar organizers might have a very, very quick survey also. So I will sit for questions at this point. And I see that there is a call for questions. Okay, so there are a bunch of questions coming in from the Q&A. Okay, so allow me first to stop share so you can see me. Okay, first question from, please share eligibility and timeline for US visa. I hope I did that. That was this entire presentation. But of course, I didn't cover everything. I can't possibly. So you are welcome. Please do. That's what this is about. It's about exchange of information. So please feel free to reach out to me and ask whatever question I did not cover, because surely I didn't cover all. How can we move from an E-2 visa to EB-5? Okay, so there is a bit of acrobatics involved, particularly if your E-2 visa application was made without anticipating that maybe you would also do an EB-5 visa down the road. So let's talk about it. Use your free consultation to talk about this. There are some issues. So sometimes an E-2 investment can be booked on your tax returns as a loan, for example, and that's okay for E-2 purposes. It's not okay for EB-5 purposes. There are things like that. So let's discuss. What is the actual cost difference and benefits between an EB-5 and E-2? Great, great question. So the EB-5 visa, we have we know what the costs are in a range because there's a minimum. It's at minimum $900,000 plus professional fees plus administrative fees. So let's estimate up, and let's say it's $1 million, between 950,000 to $1 million. That's the cost of an EB-5. The E-2 is more flexible. However, if you are not yet a treaty national, you have to make that investment into a CBI program first. Now, in most instances, that is still going to be less expensive than a straight up EB-5, because if you look at that chart comparing the CBI programs, let's say you do a real estate based one and it's 300,000 US. Now there are fees on top of that. So let's estimate up and let's say 400,000. Well, you still have 500,000 delta as compared with the EB-5 to look for an E-2 investment. And many E-2 investments are priced well under that. Can you tell us something about the British UK passport holder? Yes, if I understand you correctly. In fact, British investors were my very first 15 years ago. And I've spent significant time in Great Britain, so it's one of the countries that are near and dear to my heart, among others, not to play favorites. So the UK already enjoys a treaty with the United States, many treaties, right? So you would be in the one-step process. We would get you in the flow, intake your data, and then plug it in, and then you would be scheduled for an E-2 interview in London. Waiting time, etc. So COVID is what throws a bit of a curveball here. We know that as of July, consulates are reopening to process E-2 visa applications, and these are being rolled out. And the consulates actually have very good information on their websites about this. So you are recommended and very much invited to have the consultation with me specifically about the E-2 application process, which has very deep grooves. I mean, there are a lot of E-2 applicants from the UK. Will having the E-2 visa and staying in the US help speed up getting the green card, or is it easier being outside the US and applying for a green card? It depends in part. You are from the Middle East. There is no green card backlog for you, thankfully. And there's an added bonus for you in the EB-5 side of the equation, because USCIS recently announced that it would prioritize applications from countries that are not backlogged. And the idea is to get these people through the system as quickly as possible so that they can be issued a visa, because they can. There is no backlog for them. So you would apply for the EB-5 visa and have that go through relatively quickly, and then go through the consular process for a green card. Is it easier being outside the United States versus coming into the United States first? I mean, we should discuss all of the factors at play in your particular situation and in your families. It's for you, I think it's really the investment amount. You know, that's a key consideration. Yes, you don't need, you can just go straight to the EB-5 process and consular process outside, but it's $900,000 as opposed to if you went the E-2 route. It's quicker, it's less in terms of the investment threshold. So definitely worth a discussion. My son is 24 and has phased out of the family EB-5 application. I am so sorry. Could I apply for myself, age 50, and my son be a part of the E-2 application at 24? No, unfortunately, no. He could, if he went through the Grenada program, he could get Grenada citizenship and all the benefits there, and he could then get an E-2 visa himself. And certainly you could. But he can't be a part of your E-2 application. He has aged out of that. What is the percentage of regional centers that have paid back investments during 2020? Wow. Well, I can't tell you in terms of percentages. I'm not sure that that data exists. But you will, if you do poking around of any kind, you will probably see the regional centers who have repaid. There are quite a few at this point because the program is now over 20 years old. And so especially the older ones are going to have repaid, and something that it's to be celebrated, and they're very, very proud of it. It is an accomplishment, and there are a number. It's good, very good to see that. With a hotel project, how are regional centers creating jobs due to COVID-19? Yeah. So this is something that I am watching very, very closely, as are other EB-5 industry professionals, because what happens is when we had work stoppages because of COVID-19, the construction stopped for a time. And when construction stops, you don't have expenditures which drive the job creation. And then even after, if COVID hit after completion, the issue was, well, as a hotel, you were not really operational. You had very, very low occupancy because people weren't traveling. And so if your jobs were based on revenues, there was a problem there as well. If all of this happened after job creation, wonderful. If this is happening in the middle of job creation, it can be problematic, but it really depends on the timing of things. If there is time to go, so if your investors are relatively early in their timeline, then that project has years probably to get up and running again and to create the job. So it's really project specific, and it's also investor specific. It depends on where you are in the life of the particular project. Want to make sure I'm being fair. This is wonderful. We have lots of questions. With the investment level at 900K or 1.8 million for non-TEAs, isn't it better to do a direct investment now? How much would it cost to create 10 jobs in the US now? Is it better? In my experience, it really, really depends on you, the individual investor. And sometimes the choice is very easy. If you're undertaking this, or if your child is looking at this, and your child is 22 years old and is still in graduate school, there's no way that child is not going to be interested in creating, in most instances, and managing that business. So that child is most likely going to go in through the regional center program. Other clients are much more hands-on, and they have an idea. and they want to put their money into their own investments. I will say that there are clients who are like that and invest into their own business and yet don't want the burdens of the EB-5 compliance requirements associated with that business. And so we'll have that business and do a regional center EB-5 investment. So it really varies. How much would it cost to create 10 jobs in a row now? Well, if you do the math and you do like US minimum wage, or around $15 an hour, it is cheaper. It's more economical to do the 10 jobs viewed in a certain way. However, the requirement is that they have to be 10 US full-time jobs. They have to be bona fide jobs. They have to be created with an intention to have these positions be permanent. So I think that I would invite you to have your consultation around that question. And I think if it's the same person, you have a number of other excellent questions, so we could cover a lot of ground. Can my family and I work with an EB-5 and E-2 visa? Yes, yes. So once you become a conditional permanent resident, once you've come into the United States as an EB-5 visa holder, everyone in your derivative, in your family, will have work authorization because they are green card holders, conditionally, but they're green card holders. E-2 visa, yes, for you with respect to the E-2 business, and your spouse for anyone, not your kid. I'm going to hit some other questions because I think this might be one person with lots of wonderful questions. No, it's not. Okay, it might be others that are just anonymous. Why has the administration fee increased when it's the same level of work? Do you mean for EB-5 regional center investments? You will have to ask the regional center if that's your question. How can you help expedite the application process? Well, there is some good news here. If there is a good reason to expedite your process, even in COVID-19 times, and in some instances, because of COVID-19. For example, if you're an essential worker, I have a number of Indian doctors who have been successful in getting expedites because they're essential workers. And there are exceptions to the COVID-19 bans and restrictions if you are an essential worker in the national interest. Otherwise, there are criteria that you have to satisfy to be able to say you deserve an expedite. And it's entirely discretionary. USCIS can say, no, we don't quite meet the hurdle, or yeah, you do. And there's really, it's difficult to predict unless the situation truly is dire and there's a humanitarian component, perhaps there's a health issue, then it's a stronger case. Is UK included as a treaty country? Yes, ma'am, it sure is. Do you pay worldwide taxes income with the E-2? Very good question that I can't answer as an immigration lawyer only and not a tax professional. But these are common questions that US visa applicants will have, and your accountant and tax advisors on either side should be able to help you with that. And I can certainly be helpful in that respect and make introductions. What is the E-2 substantial amount? It depends on the business, and it's a proportionality test. So if the business is a manufacturing business that costs $50 million to be operational, then your substantial investment is going to have to be in the millions. If you're, but it doesn't have to be 70% of those millions because the scale of that activity is so expensive. But if your business is, say, a consulting or service business and it's very low cost, then your investment will have to be relatively high proportional to that. So if it's a 200,000 investment, maybe 100,000 would be maybe okay, maybe not. It's that kind of thing. It's a proportionality test based on the nature of the business. With the Grenada CBI program, do you recommend the donation path or approved real estate project path for persons wishing to apply to an E-2? That really is an inquiry that you'll have to explore on your own. As you know, probably, the donation to the National Transformation Fund is less expensive. And so for that reason, it is very interesting and attractive to a lot of prospective investors. But there is no real estate asset at the end of the day that you could sell or keep. So that's up to, you've got to really explore that and also discuss that with the Grenada CBI professionals. Again, I would be very pleased to make introductions in that respect. Can you give me your contact details again, please? I would be delighted to. The best way to reach me is probably by email. So I'll give you email and WhatsApp. Email is my first name and my firm name. It's Carolyn at Carolyn Lee PLLC.com. It's CAROLYN at CAROLYNLEEPLLC.com. And let's see if I can actually type it in here to everybody. Very well. Okay. If you get the Grenada citizenship, will your original citizenship be a reason for rejection? Not for rejection of the E-2, no. Unlike the green cards like EB-5, where your country of birth is what's relevant. Even if you have a citizenship in other places, it's your country of birth that determines your place in the green card line. The E-2 visa is not. It looks to the country of nationality that you put forth that you are in fact a national of. So if you have two passports and there is only a treaty with the one, you may be granted an E-2 visa based on your nationality in the treaty country, for sure. Okay. Any specific requirements for E-2 investors, such as managerial skills and experience, being able to communicate in English? I do think that the match in preparation and the position is relevant, and in a way that was just really not a concern in the EB-5 context. For EB-5s, investors can't be entirely passive, but they don't have to be actively managing. In the E-2 context, the E-2 applicant does not have to be actively managing. That's not the test. It's develop and direct the enterprise of their owners, which is a lower threshold, and it can be satisfied in flexible ways. But we would want to look at that. We would want to look at the preparation so that if it were beneficial, for example, to highlight the preparation, we would certainly not want to lose that opportunity. How long do the jobs need to be in place for? Also an excellent question. The jobs don't have to be maintained, but they have to be full-time and bona fide when created. So for example, in our COVID situation, the jobs were created, and because of COVID restrictions, they're furloughed or temporarily shelved or similar. Those jobs would be given credit to the investors as long as they were good faith and full-time at the time. So that is very, very good news. And also, if the time comes to prove up job creation, and because of COVID, you didn't quite hit the target of 10 jobs for all of the investors in the project, there is wiggle room. It's discretionary, so there's no guarantee that the service will agree to give you that wiggle room, but there is wiggle room, reasonable period of time to create the required jobs. Can the E-2 be a direct investment or a regional center? E-2 can be fashioned into a direct EB-5 investment as well, but for the reasons that we've touched on, didn't do a deep dive into, it does have to be done ideally with planning ahead of time so that you can bring your E-2 investments in increments, not necessarily 900,000 all at once, and that's a benefit, but we want to do that. We want to structure those tranches that will work for EB-5 purposes. So it can be done, but planning ahead of time is best. For regional centers, I'll say that traditionally there had not been a meeting of the E-2 and regional center investments, but it is happening now. And I will say I am actively advising and into that bridge between the E-2 and the EB-5. I think there's tremendous demand for that product. So would be happy to discuss that with you in our freebie consultation. There are questions, but I think we've gone through quite a few, and that was really fun. And I invite others to reach out to me and take this poll that is in progress with BLS. And again, I'll put my WhatsApp coordinates here as well. And please participate in the poll. It is live. How long should, and while you're doing that, because you can do more than one thing at a time, I'll just take another question. How long should you stay in the US per year to keep the visa valid? Yeah, oh, the E-2 visa valid. Well, you're developing and directing. Now, you don't even have to be in the United States to be developing and directing, depending on the circumstances. So your conduct is going to be consistent with the business and with how your role was described. So that's really the first thing. And we would talk about that. And at minimum, you do not want to be, or I should say at maximum, you do not want to be outside the United States for more than 180 days, I would say. That is sort of the rule of thumb. It's a green card rule, but we want to show that you have sufficient ties to your E-2 business. So that's something to talk about. It's going to be specific to the business, your role. And I think we are good. This was such a pleasure, and thank you so much, all of the attendees who came live. I think it's that's really special in these times to share time together, and especially worldwide. It's very cool. And so I look forward to continuing our conversation, and my thanks to BLS, our wonderful hosts for this webinar. Thank you so much.